Welcome to the third session of Reimagining Retirement, Exploring Your Life Plan. My name is Roger Baldwin. I'm an emeritus professor from Michigan State University and the current president of the Arohi Board of Directors. In our second session, Dr. Stacy Gordon helped us to identify our values and goals. Today, we will hear from a panel of retired faculty and staff from across the US and Canada about their strategies for rebuilding their networks in retirement, developing new social connections, and identifying resources to find purpose in this next chapter. I hope that you will find their experiences to be helpful as you develop your own strategies. Now I'm pleased to introduce Sasha Heathman, a Fidelity Workplace financial consultant. Ms. Heathman promotes financial wellness for plan participants through one-on-one planning and educational events like this event today. She holds a bachelor's degree in human development from the University of Texas at Austin and a master's degree in business administration from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Welcome, Sasha.
Thank you, Roger. And it is a pleasure to be here for session 3 today, representing Fidelity Investments and the collaboration with Arohi. At Fidelity, we have helped millions of people retire, and it's through that experience that we've actually found the decision to retire is both a head and a heart decision. And it's through the assessment of both the quantitative and the qualitative aspects that our panel are going to talk through today that really come together to help your retirement vision a reality and really redefine or find that purpose in the next chapter, as Roger mentioned. My role as a workplace financial consultant provides me with the pleasure every day to meet with people to help them create a plan for how to successfully transition into retirement and through retirement. And it's through my conversations, especially with those in higher education, that I found that retirement is sometimes less of a financial decision and more about a what's next, right? What's next for someone who has dedicated their entire career to advancing a mission of their university, connecting with and mentoring students and colleagues, and of course, engaging in rewarding research. So if you would like help reviewing the financial aspect of your retirement or would be interested in a second opinion, please watch for a follow-up email from Arohi, and there will be direction on how to connect with me or one of my colleagues to meet and talk one-on-one. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Stacy Gordon to the virtual stage with me. Dr. Gordon is the program director of Next Phase Adult Caregiving and Retirement for the Work-Life Office at New York University. In her role, she relies upon her expertise in social work and gerontology to provide university-wide programming, thought leadership, and personalized consultations with faculty and administrators on adult caregiving, aging, and retirement planning. She developed and now directs the NYU Society of Retired Faculty. Dr. Gordon will introduce our panel of retirees and will also moderate their discussion about their strategies for rebuilding their networks, developing new social connections, and identifying resources to find purpose in this next chapter. Please welcome Dr. Gordon.
Thank you very much, Sasha, and welcome everyone. I'm so pleased to join you and today's panelists. We're planning to have a dynamic conversation, and so I'd like to begin. Please join me in welcoming our first panelist, Jan Bluestein. Jan is an MD, PhD health policy researcher who retired from her role as professor at NYU's Robert Wagner Graduate School of Public Service in 2022. Jan continues her research in medicine and population health at NYU's Medical School Much of her time in retirement is spent taking courses, visiting New York City's landmarks, and enjoying family and friends. And I must say, Jan is from my home university of NYU, so welcome, Jan. Next, we have Marty Howard. Marty is the former CFO and treasurer of a large urban private research university. He is fully appreciative of the life-changing mission and impact of higher education on many levels. He's currently enjoying the freedom and flexibility to build a fulfilling post-primary career life. Welcome, Marty. And next we have Eddie Murphy. Wonderful. Eddie is a founding member of Arohi and a Wellsville, Ohio native who returned to her village after residing in Southern California for nearly 4 decades. Yes. She worked for Hughes Aircraft and later UCLA, where she directed retiree activities and organizations. And Eddie has 9 years in retirement, which feels like 9 months, she says. She returned to her roots after nearly 50 years, and she has been on a ride she wouldn't have missed, she says. Welcome, Eddie. And last but not least is Louise Nasmith. Louise is Professor Emerita at the University of British Columbia's Department of Family Practice and an honorary fellow with the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. She's also a retired family physician. She's been an educator and administrator at 3 universities over the course of her career and is currently an avid hiker. So welcome all. It's wonderful to be here with you today. The first question I'm going to ask to all of you. So we'll start with Jan. Jan, can you tell us what are the best things about being a retired person?
Yeah, for me, there are 2 things, time and space. So I love having the time to do exactly what I want to do. And I love having the space and the opportunity to engage with the things I want to engage, and the people that I want to engage with. It's really been very gratifying.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. And Marty, how about you? What are the best things about being retired?
Beyond the time and space, I guess I would describe it as the freedom and flexibility to make choices and to have time to do things. You know, if you think about the bucket list and all the items that you save up in that bucket list, it gives you the time to start ticking those off. And at the same time, one of the unexpected items is I find myself sleeping better. I think I have a healthier diet. I have more time to exercise, and I even have a smartwatch now, and I'm concerned about getting 10,000 steps every day. So it's a very different life than what I had before.
Right, right. A little slower, a little full of different ways of self-care, which is really important. And Eddie, how about you? What are the best things about your life in retirement?
Number 1, I would say unfettered time. That's how I describe it. And I think of it as a bit of a recipe also. I can put a dash of this in it and a dash of that, and it all works out just fine. But unfettered time for sure.
Right, right. And how about you, Louise? What are the best things about being retired?
Well, I probably should say all of the above, but just to add to getting to choose, the flip side of that is actually being able to say no and not feel guilty. To filter things through, what a friend of mine said is, if it doesn't bring you joy, don't do it. But I think the flexibility and also just things are at a slower pace. And actually that is just fine. I don't think we recognize to what extent we are just moving at such a really, really fast pace. And the ability to slow down is quite wonderful.
Well, thank you all for those responses. They're all sort of in the same genre of time and space and freedom and saying no and not feeling guilty. So does anyone else have anything to add? No? Okay, so we'll move to the next question. And this question is for Eddie. Eddie, what aspect of retirement living surprised you the most as it pertains to your life and your relationships with people?
So I'm going to answer that question by stating that in my retirement, I moved into uncharted grounds, or uncommon grounds, I should say, although retirement could be defined as that as well. But I physically, literally moved into an uncommon area for me. I moved from where I was to a place, my village in which I grew up. And so, having not been there in a long time, nearly 5 decades, there were people there that didn't know me, and I was unknown to them. So I had to be wise in my approach to how I developed relationships there. It would have been easy to be comfortable and gravitate toward the handful of people that I knew, a couple of family members, perhaps the people that were at my church that were still there that I grew up in, a couple of classmates that I graduated high school with. But I decided and was purposeful about this. The church I grew up in, I decided not to attend. And I totally went to a different church, which I still am attending. It shocked everybody, but I'm glad I did it because it opened up a whole new pond of people for me. And that has been rich. I probably wouldn't have known them otherwise had I not made that conscious decision to reach out to them. And so relationships in my retirement, I wanted to make sure that I didn't come into territory thinking that, taken for granted that they would embrace me. I was an outsider because I had been gone for so long. And so therefore I had to be savvy and sensitive and wise about how I connected with the people here in this uncommon ground for me.
Right. I mean, I find that a very brave choice. First of all, moving back to your village of origin is brave. And secondly, choosing to find a new home for yourself in a new church, which is really going out of your comfort zone. And maybe you did that as a result of the 40 years that you were away.
Yes.
You came home a different person, which is a very beautiful thing. Yeah. So,
and if I can add, it was actually from one extreme to another, because I moved from Southern California, Los Angeles, into rural Appalachia to a village of 3,500. So it was a drastic change.
Right.
But I'm grateful that I have been able to forge and connect and form relationships here in spite of that big difference.
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. That's very brave of you. And it sounds like it's been very successful. So congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have a response to that question? The aspect of relationships that retirement living that surprised you as it pertains to your relationships? Any quick answers, Louise?
Well, I think, first of all, Eddie, you were incredibly courageous to have done what you did. I think what I didn't realize is to what extent the work did offer me those social relationships that I really valued. And when I did retire, I don't think I recognized that I didn't have a lot of friends outside, in part because of a busy career, being a mom, all of the things that occupy our time. Fortunately for me, the area I really wanted to explore was hiking. But I didn't know that by hiking, I joined an amazing group of women, and they have become very close friends, and they have become really my community. I think that's what you're talking about, Eddie, is having a community around you that matters. You can turn to them, you can rely on them. And that was a surprise to me. I actually didn't expect it. And I am so fortunate that that is what I discovered through a different kind of interest. But this was very, very important for me.
Right. That actually leads us nicely into the next question, which is for you, Louise, and you, Eddie, which is, have you found an unexpected group that you may have stumbled upon and found value in? So it seems like, yeah, you've both really answered that question, but I would love for you to expand.
Okay. So if I can share that, I did happen upon a person who I connected with because we had a common bond. And that bond was the love of this village in which we grew up. And so he led me to another person. And soon we had a group of 8 who had the same bond, the love for the village in which we grew up. Most of them had stayed. A couple of us had left and come back. And so given that bond, we collaborated and we formed something called the Wellsville Community Foundation. And we connected with a partnership with the village. We rolled up our sleeves and went to work. We've only been in existence for 3 years, but we have made great strides in this little village. One, for instance, is the first medical clinic that the village has ever had. So that was pretty important to the residents here, but that's our focus. But that bond is what brought those 8 people together. And they are part of my, well, it's a lot of work, everyday life. They're part of my everyday life. And not only with the strides that we made, but just the interrelationships has brought value to me and relevancy.
Wonderful. Yeah, it sounds like that core group is really sustaining you with this work.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
And I love, thank you for bringing the relevancy piece, because that's something I talked about last session, and that's something that we all want in retirement, right?
Yes.
So
and if I can add to that, Dr. Gordon, it's that bridge and linkage that you talked about. That one person led me to that other person, and then we went to the other person, and then we had that group.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's great. And how about you, Louise?
Well, I think obviously what you are doing, I feel like there's incredible purpose. And strangely enough, even though hiking may seem like a selfish endeavor, there was tremendous purpose that was created for me by joining this group, which I now am really fortunate to co-lead. We organize, another individual and I organize our hikes every week. But more than that, it's not just about getting out, it's about those social connections. And what this group has done, as I said earlier, is to give me individuals whom I can turn to, and they turn to others. What struck me very early on when I joined the group is that there was one individual who was recovering from knee surgery. Well, everybody was signing up to drive her to physio. And I just went, oh my goodness, this is quite something. But that was the beginning of what set the tone for me. Somebody in need, people are there to help. There is no holding back. If somebody isn't necessarily reaching out, somebody's going to make sure that they get the help they need. So that sense of real purpose, as you talked about, Eddie, is through the deep caring that goes on between what we call ourselves a sisterhood, and we really are a sisterhood. Not something, as I said, I was expecting to find, but boy, am I so lucky that I have been able to encounter that.
Yes.
Wonderful. So Jan, I know you want to jump in here. And actually this is really piggybacks on the next question, which is, have you been involved in an organization that's been particularly helpful in keeping you connected?
Yeah, I've been fortunate in finding several of them. And the first one Dr. Gordon knows about, which is not a sisterhood, but it is TARTS, T-A-R-T-S. Okay, so it's talking about retirement together seriously. Which is a program that Dr. Gordon started for people who are thinking about retiring and people who have just retired. And it was really it was an opportunity to talk together about retirement in a sort of anything anybody wanted to talk about. It was very open-ended. It has some structure. After TARTS, I've been a little bit of a serial organization joiner. I found an organization called the Transition Network. It's TTN, and somebody has I believe has their URL. They are a national organization for women in transition, and most of the women in the organization are retiring, but some of them are divorcing or they've lost a spouse. Somebody who has a personal transition. This is a very actually a wonderful organization. And finally, my current favorite organization is something called LP Squared, which is Lifelong Peer Learning Program, which is a organization for retired professionals to teach each other. And I, like many people who are on this call, I love school. So I have the opportunity to take classes with people who are interested in teaching me. And the most important thing about it, though, very much to what Louise was talking about, what is the fellowship in that group and the understanding on the part of everybody that we are in a different phase of our life and that we really want to meet people. And it has a tremendous, just like you were talking about, Louise, a tremendous norm of warmth and respect and helpfulness that is just fabulous. And so I'm lucky to have found that one. That is there are a number of organizations like that nationally, and sometimes they're housed at universities. This one's lpsquare.org. I think someone's going to throw it into the chat. But in any event, lpsquarenewyorkcity.org. So those organizations, and I'm not I have to say to those who are on the watching this and saying, I don't like joining things. It turns out that when you're retired, all of a sudden, it's a great thing to do. It's a wonderful way to get a sense of what other people are doing, get a sense of what the possibilities are, watch people succeed, watch people maybe not succeed so much, and really a very good way of kind of checking where you are. So I've found that to be wonderful and a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jan. Yeah, finding new community is very important when you leave the community that you've been a part of for so long. And, Louise, it strikes me that that you have sort of this mutual caring. You describe the mutual caring, and I think that's part of many of these organizations that you are all involved in, that, and you now have the time to really commit to caring for others in a way that you did not have when you were, fully employed. So that's a really wonderful thing. And Marty, I wanted to give you a chance to answer this question as well. If you've been involved in an organization that's been particularly helpful in keeping you connected.
Yeah, I mean, I came from a different background maybe than many on the call, from a finance world and involved in professional organizations that leveraging leadership roles that I had in those organizations, I've continued to have connections with people, typically the same age peers that have moved into retirement, and we've been able to connect and swap stories and things. I guess I should also mention, I'm kind of early in this journey relative to, I think, some of these other conversations that have been going on. So I find it helpful to hear some of the different strategies here.
Right. And Marty, our next question is for you, and that is, how have your relationships changed with people?
Yeah, well, for me, I guess in the universe of relationships that you have in your career versus post-career, I really value and cherish the core foundation relationships of family, long-term friends, faith. I have a wife and 3 adult children, 4 grandchildren, big extended family, and a lot of good small group of long-term friends. Fortunately, I haven't had to uproot and move thousands of miles away, so I have that as a support group. And it's really evolved in this short period of time that I have been in retirement mode, and allowed us, I think, to develop a much deeper relationship and quality time to engage. And when I think about the career coming out of my prior career and all of the demands and consuming really most of my life, the colleagues that I've had going forward, it's really somewhat limited in terms of the mode and frequency of connection. Although there's still a small group of people that pretty much peers to me and in the same age, and many of them retired, that we have been continuing to get together and connect and do different things. So that's been helpful. But I've tried to be intentional about not relying heavily on that old network and trying to focus more on building new ones in areas of interest that I have that I'd like to expand beyond what I've done. And so I mentioned those professional organizations and the people that I've continued to connect with, and they've served as a really good network over time. And I've also been proactive in engaging with a couple of other organizations that provide support in the form of mentoring and counseling and tutoring to underserved populations to prepare for admission to prep schools, colleges, and universities. And it's something that has keyed off of an interest that I had and experience in mentoring city high school graduates while I was working, and seeing the impact that that experience for them had, and staying in touch with them really to this day, and hoping to be able to find some time to spend more focus in that area. So I've started to develop relationships there. I was also asked this past year to join the town finance committee, and I've lived in this town, raised my family, been here for 30 years, but never really engaged much in that. I left in the dark and came home in the dark, but now I'm actually getting to meet people locally and learning a lot about municipal finance and budgeting while building relationships close to home. And then lastly, as you indicated, or someone indicated at the beginning of the presentation, I am in a part-time internal consulting role at Fidelity, and a lot of that developed from multiple relationships over decades, really, and conversations that I had when I started to say I was going to be moving off and transitioning into retirement. They said, well, how about, would you consider, we're thinking about this and that, and one thing led to another. And what that's resulted in is meeting and interacting with some really talented people and expanding relationships much more broadly, and trying to leverage and build on the experience and knowledge that I had throughout my career in a way that I never would have experienced before. It's an entirely different lens, looking at it from different aspects of that operation. And as a result, I really look forward to continuing expanding on those relationships and finding that mix of activity that's going to hopefully bring me this goal that you talk about, Stacy, of fulfillment, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if any of you listen to the Ezra Klein show. It's a podcast with Ezra Klein as the host. He's from San Francisco, moved to New York recently. And one of the things that he talks about in this particular episode about community is how important it is for men to make relationships, to create and develop and nurture relationships with other people in the community, with other men, with other women, but really sort of to go out of their comfort zone, because traditionally men have not done that as frequently as women have. And these relationships are every bit as important for men as they are for women. And so I'm really happy to hear that you're doing this, Marty. You're really developing, you're going out of your comfort zone, you're deepening your connection to your community. And that's actually something that I've heard from all of you, which is so interesting. You're all sort of getting to know the places that you live in a very different way. And I love that. You're all so inspiring to me, especially because, you're all in places that are so interesting, and good for you for sort of finding and settling in the ways that you have, in settling into like the deeper relationships and sort of looking at your hometowns in a very different way, which is, only going to enrich your experience in so many ways. So, Jan, my next question is for you. And the question is, what were things that worried you before you retired?
Yeah, so retirement is scary. And as Michelle Silver discussed in the first session of this series, it's really difficult to let go of your identity, your treasured identity, and to find out what's next. For me, that was my biggest concern. I was a rank and file faculty member in university. I was doing a good job. I enjoyed my job. People liked me. I liked them. My students were good. My research was good. And it was tough for me to imagine saying goodbye to that. Dr. Gordon, what you said about stages of development in your talk and the idea of retirement being an identity crisis, in sort of being it's a funny kind of identity crisis because it's self-inflicted. Assuming that you are the person who chooses whether you retire and when you retire. Now,
Right.
obviously, not everybody has that luxury, but assuming that you do, you're really just kind of putting yourself out there and saying, oops, I'm sorry, here I go, right? And that's a big deal. To me, that the metaphor that I created for myself during this period of making the decision and sort of pressing the button was that I felt like Ulysses tying myself to the mast as I went, by the sirens, and the sirens were shouting, Professor Bluestein, Professor Bluestein, the thing I loved to be called, knowing that I was going to have to stay, lashed to the mast and keep going. It's very hard to do. And it requires a lot of commitment, and it's not easy.
Right. Is what Jan's saying, is this sort of feeling resonant with all of you?
It's the fear, and I don't like to use the word fear, but the fear of the unknown, and it is disconcerting. And I'll talk a little bit later, but especially for me, charting that pathway as a single person caused me concern early on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And how about you, Louise?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think identity is an important element, and I don't think I was actually so worried about that, Jan. What I was worried about was finding purpose. I had a wonderful career, I really did, I think, contribute a fair amount in different things. What I wanted to make sure is that I could still find meaning in what I was doing. And I talked about hiking, but later on I'll talk about other things that I've been able to do, because that has defined me. And if I didn't have that, I think I would find, then I would be kind of rudderless. So that meaning, that purpose was really critical for me.
Right. And that's part of the relevancy, right? Like, it's not only others defining you, but it's how you define yourself, right? With the meaning and the relevance that you bring to it, which is, I think, what I heard you say, Jan, that it's really about going from Professor Bluestein to, whomever you will be, right? Yeah, it is a huge leap. How about you, Marty? Do you have something to add?
I think that, the issue of this third stage of life and having a complete blank canvas is a little bit daunting, and it does require some thought in terms of how you're going to navigate there. And the issue of purpose and fulfillment is certainly important. But I think ultimately it's, this concept of joy or fulfillment is what's going to drive it. And I guess as an accountant by trade, I think of things in terms of a ledger, two sides of the ledger. And you've got memories and you have dreams. And the expectation is, in this phase, you're going to bring down the number of dreams and have more and more memories, right? So that's how you want to try to approach it. Very simple.
Doesn't the ledger have to balance, though?
Well, no, you try to wipe out that whole other side. Right?
Okay.
It's a cash account.
All right, got it. That's fabulous. I love that metaphor. Okay. So does anyone have anything to add to that? No? Okay. Actually, the next question, Marty, for you was, did you retire with a plan to build the relationships you said you've been building, or are you just making it up as you go along?
I would say for me, it's the latter rather than the former. And I think for two reasons. One is, I don't think I had a whole lot of time to devote to focusing on building a full-blown plan. And then equally important is I've always been stuck with this quote that you hear from time to time from the former general and U.S. President Eisenhower that talked about, in preparing for battle, plans are useless and planning is indispensable. And if you think about retirement, like we just did, as a real open nature canvas where you need to be able to pivot and be flexible, I think the better approach is trying to navigate it as you go along. It's hard to have it fully laid out in advance. So I think that nimbleness and agility in navigating all those various potential paths is important. Personally, as I said, a lockdown plan didn't necessarily work for me. There's got to be a willingness to adapt and recalibrate as the situations arise. And what I've tried to do is look at opportunities that might leverage my knowledge and experience to engage in activities that I find meaningful and satisfying. I no longer have to do things because it's just part of the job and it's not something I necessarily want to engage in. So that's quite refreshing. And, when I started down this journey thinking about, what am I going to do when I transitioned to retirement, I had done many years of adjunct teaching. And I really enjoyed that and thought that that would be what I would do. And I had actually gone down the path with a nearby college and was going to start doing that, and ended up really pursuing this opportunity I mentioned before that was presented to me to work in this opportunity, which is new for them and new for me. And it's really been a great path. So I've had to put the part-time teaching and the offers, I've had a few offers of interim CFO roles on the back seat, and maybe I'll do that somewhat later. There's plenty of time, hopefully, going forward. But when I retired, what was not on my radar was this town finance committee activity that I mentioned, nor the volunteer work supporting underserved populations. So the lesson for me in all of that is, don't lock yourself in. Get creative. Understand what you really enjoy doing. That provides that fulfillment and purpose, and pursue it.
Right. Yeah. It strikes me that one piece of, in this sort of decision-making process is something that you just mentioned, Marty, understand yourself, right? And this is something that we gain the ability to do as we grow older. When we're younger, we might not understand exactly what makes us feel good and we might have passions, but we might not be able to sort of put them into practice and plans to put into practice. But the wisdom of older age actually allows us to really choose things that bring us meaning and purpose. And that's one of the benefits of age that we don't necessarily think of. And I've heard you all sort of say that this is, that you're doing things that bring you joy, and that you understand what brings you joy now, whereas you might not have before. So that's an added benefit. So Jan, yes.
I was going to say, this wasn't this sort of list making or self-accounting was not something that I had anticipated in retirement. But as I began to retire, I realized that it was important. And I want to recommend a book, which is called The Encore Handbook by Marcy Albahauer, and it will go into the chat again. And it has a list. It's just very helpful. It has a list of things that might be things that you really care about, or values that you might hold very dear. And you go down, for me, going down that list and saying, yes. And, I've kept that list of yeses and I keep it in my wallet. And every so often I check, and see how I'm doing and what I need. This would be great for you, Marty. This is sort of an accounting exercise. What I need to sort of bump up and what I need to ratchet down. And it's very helpful. I did not lead my other adult life that consciously.
Right.
I did helpful now. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are many reasons that you didn't, but, partly because you didn't have as many options when you were younger. You might, and you needed to make a living. And I know you wanted to start a family, and there were a lot of different, competing options. So, yeah. So I want to actually move into our next question, which is for Eddie. But I want to preface it with the fact that many people are retiring, who are retiring today, and many people in America are living solo. In other words, are not are not part of a couple, are, have not had children, and they are retiring alone, right? But it's not only alone, because we know that there are many ways for people to create and develop relationships and nurture them. And I just want to say, before I ask you about your own solo retirement, Eddie, that at NYU, we actually just started what we're calling the Solo Retirement Network.
Awesome.
And I am so sort of moved by how many people have responded to the query of, like, who wants to join this? How many people have actually come and been active and had suggestions that, for activities and ways to connect. So Eddie, I'm using you as an example of someone who's solo aging successfully. And I just wanted to ask you to tell us about that.
So one of the terms that I frequently use is that we need each other. Each of us need each other. I say that all the time to various groups. But my background story is that I've been very fortunate in that my whole career has in some way been involved with retirement. First, as a young person, doing one-on-one consultation with people, and then developing to something much larger, but that has been my vocation. And so I have been very, very fortunate in that I had a bird's eye view of seeing and hearing and observing thousands of people retire. I learned some of the mistakes that they said they made, things that they would have done differently. I learned about their successes, and I could hear them talk about various aspects of their retirement. So I was very fortunate in that way. Early on, when I was 40 years ago, when I observed them and heard them, the main focus at that time, what I gleaned, was financial security.
Yes.
And so I learned at an early age that that was important to start planning financially. And then at some point, I became aware of what I call the soft issues of retirement, psychological, social, etc. And I start looking at that in terms of the retirees that I was interfacing with. And what came out of that was I realized, statistic then, which is still today, holds true today, that people who are not married, cohabitate, have a partner, don't live as long as those that do. That got my attention. I didn't know that that was going to be my pathway 40 years later, but here I am. But along the way, I got to observe that as it got closer and closer to retirement. Oh, maybe I'm going to be solo in retirement. And so what I learned to do as I moved along towards this goal of retirement, and bear in mind, that was my world. So I was planning because that was my world. I learned to not make decisions all alone. And I would identify people in particular expertise who were subject matter experts. I would identify them and develop a relationship with them if I didn't know somebody with that particular need that I had. For instance, buying a home, looking at a home in retirement. I would take somebody, I brought contractors with me to take a look at what I was contemplating to give me advice. As a single person, I knew about the things that I needed to do to have a very healthy retirement. So being active and living well, healthy was important to me. To establish a good relationship with a good practitioner, medical practitioner, was important to me. I have a friend that I call her my accountability friend. She keeps me accountable for certain things in my life. It was important for me to establish what's important to me, a faith community. And I sort of look at all of these different topics that are of interest to me, ones that bring me joy, as compartments almost. I learned very quickly that isolation can be devastating. and how important it is to be connected.
Right.
So I made it purposefully to be connected with various facets of life that pertain to me and that I found important for me. And so going back to that, I have this compartment over here and this compartment over here. That's how I look at it. And what it all boils down to is that is my support group. That's my support group. And a lot of people they're shocked sometimes. Oh, you've never been married? No, I don't apologize for it. And they will say to me, well, what do you need? No, what I need is I'll determine. And I do determine that, what I need. But I would classify my retirement as thriving. But I do go back to that I was very, very fortunate in that I was able to view and observe all of these retirements over many, many years.
Right, right. So, I actually find that to be right in line with the literature on loneliness and relationships. So Robert Waldinger, who wrote the book, The Good Life, and also did the longest study on happiness in adult life, actually says that what makes us happy and less lonely and healthy is relationships.
Yes.
Good, strong relationships is what we all need. And I have to say that in this Ezra Klein podcast, again, back to Ezra Klein, I learned that that actually that marriage longevity benefit is not there anymore. Unfortunately, for those of us who were banking on that, it's really about relationships. It's all about the quality of our relationships. And I see the doctors also, the medical doctors also,
yes,
nodding to this because it is true. I mean, what makes our life meaningful and fulfilling is our relationships, and the stronger, the better. And it's not only about loneliness. It's that the quality of our relationships actually predicts the health of our bodies and our brains as we go through life.
That's right.
And that is so powerful. So another book is Robert Waldinger's The Good Life. We should put that in the chat. So thank you, Eddie. I appreciate that. And, that is really our, sort of what we're trying to build in this solo aging network. We're sort of trying to teach and build. But the most interesting thing to me has been that people know that, many people, especially those who have been living on their own, who chose not to get married and not to have kids, they know this already, right? Because that's the life that they are building with, with other people. So, so thank you again.
If I can just add one thing,
yeah, sure.
I can add. And so when I've talked about those interests that I have, for instance, I am a walker. So I do like walking by myself, solo walking, but at times I want somebody that I want to converse with while I walk.
Yeah.
But also as a single woman, I also know that there are places that I probably shouldn't walk by myself. So that's on my radar as well. It would be unsafe to do that. So I just wanted to bring in that element. And also one of the things that I observed, sometimes not all single people, but some don't like to cook for themselves. And so they'll skip meals, not good. And so that's where my accountability person comes in for me. So
right. That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. I love that concept of the accountability person. Like your counsel, right?
Yeah.
We all have our counsels that we build and develop over the years.
Yes.
So the next question is for you, Louise. And the question is, were there actions that you took or things that you did in advance of retirement to prepare, to help make new connections? Did you plan to volunteer, for example?
Well, I think it's actually building really nicely on what's been said. I will tell you a quick story because it actually is related to answering that question. When I was starting to contemplate retiring, and I was at a conference, a family medicine conference, and sitting with a colleague, and we were actually giving a workshop on Are You Thinking of Retiring? And I said to him, I'm kind of wondering about what I will do. And he looked at me and he said, Louise, it's not about what you do, it's about who you are. And so I think very much linked to many of the comments that have been made by my colleagues on the screen. And boy, did that hit me right between the eyes, because I sat back and I thought, well, who I am has to do with what I value, what brings me joy, what gives me meaning, right? So circling back. And where I landed was the relationships. The relationships that I'd had as a family physician with patients, with my students, with even the individuals in my office. I always valued those relationships. And I'd been fortunate enough to have an experience through one of the projects I was involved with some of the coaching that's going on at our university, with individual one-on-one coaching. And so decided that that's how I would kind of repurpose myself. So the year I had an admin leave, I took the certificate program in organizational coaching here at UBC, which then allowed me to volunteer my time. I have no interest in starting my own business. That's definitely not my strength. But basically, I'm volunteering my time through the coaching services that are provided here at UBC, which is a fabulous service for faculty and staff. And I've coached over the last few years large numbers of faculty and staff one-on-one about all kinds of stuff, difficult issues, career issues, or what have you. And that, so in some ways I did plan. The other little bit that I might just say, what was actually really interesting for me, and I hadn't thought about this, is I didn't gradually retire. I basically decided I'm retiring. But that admin leave, and by doing the coaching program, gave me some structure in that year. Right. So it allowed me to actually not be quite at loose ends, which I think is also kind of terrifying for people. What am I going to do when I get up today? Yeah. I had structure, I had courses to go to, I had homework to do, and it transitioned me that way. But then it led to this lovely ability to volunteer, to give back, but to have these one-on-one relationships with individuals, which has been really terrific.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So we have one last question, and then we're going to move into questions and answers from the audience. But I want to ask Marty, and then I'm going to actually ask you to each give like 1 or 2 sentences to answer this question before we move into the Q&A. So Marty, what questions do you recommend the audience members should ask themselves as they prepare for retirement, as it relates to creating community, developing relationships, finding what to do? And is there anything you wished you'd done differently? Well, I know I just asked you 3 questions, so answer whatever you.
Yeah, I think that the danger, I guess, of making sure you're thinking more broadly is, particularly if you haven't retired yet, is you're looking through the lens of the present, which can really impede you from seeing all of the future possibilities. So if you can just consciously try to think more broadly in what I would describe as a discovery process, as you go through some pretty open and broad questions, to move away from just the incremental changes of what you're doing now to maybe something you're doing in retirement. What do you really think your purpose is, right? What is that purpose in your life? Can you describe it? What are your values? What are your innate strengths and weaknesses? And what do I now want to achieve in my life? And as you answer those, hopefully it'll filter down into what gives you the satisfaction and happiness that you're trying to achieve and hopefully will live with in those remaining years.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. Good advice. Does anyone else want to answer that question, Louise? I think you were going to.
Sure. I think getting back to what I said earlier, like, who am I? Because I do believe that gets at values and purpose. But I think it is important, and maybe I didn't do enough of this, is to start thinking of those relationships, because everything we've said here so far has been the importance of relationships. And I'm not sure, I said I lucked into things, but I'm not sure I actually thought, so with whom do I have relationships? Because you actually need to have conversations with those people. As you move into retirement, You can't take things for granted, be it your spouse or your kids or your friends. And talking with people and bouncing ideas off of them and giving them a chance to know that potentially their relationship with you is going to change a bit. And you got to work at it. So I think that would be sort of things that I would really argue are important elements as you are preparing for retirement.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. That's great advice. Jan?
Yeah, I agree with the notion of assessing values. And I again recommend this book, the Encore Handbook, as a good frame for that. For me, I have been in such a hole for the last 40 years. You know, I mean, I was astonished when I retired how focused I have been on my career. And I really needed to find out like what's out there. Instead of poking my head out and looking around, what's out there? I live in New York City, you know, and there's a lot out there. And, you know, and a lot, the more you can do, I just found that the more things you can try, it's almost like the way young people date now, you know, they go and they try this and then try that and they try this. And I was sort of doing that with organizations and people, not in a using way, not in a mean way, but just as a sort of like, wow, what's really out there? Yeah. And there's no substitute for that, right? You could make up all kinds of stories you want to about what's out there, but you have to do some reality testing. And I think it's comforting to do that as soon as you can, rather than to, you know, postpone that.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. I love that sort of exploration phase, you know, of that early retirement. It's sort of like just getting a sense of, you know, what's going on around me and lifting your head out of your work for the first time in, as you say, 40 years. Mm-hmm. That is very powerful. And Eddie, how about you?
Well, I don't know how many people this will affect that are hearing this, but make sure that the notion to retire is your own. I have run across some situations where it was influenced by someone else. And so ask the question, is this my time? Is this my decision to move forward into retirement?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think I get what you mean. I think that oftentimes, you know, people will suggest it, or an organization might suggest it, but, you know, actually, I think that that's very important. The way to take the step out of your work is by you stepping out rather than someone stepping out for you or stepping you out
of it. Exactly.
Yeah. Marty, I saw that you raised your hand. Did you have one thing to say?
Yeah, I was gonna recommend a book, since I hear people throwing books out there, and I only read one, so this is probably a good one. And the reason I read it is a friend of mine retired around the same time from a partnership position at one of the global consulting firms, and they had a pretty formal program. You know, he was telling me what he went through, and this was the book they had them read, and it was written by a guy named Arthur Brooks, who's a social psychologist by training. He's on the Harvard Business School faculty. And I thought it was a kind of interesting framework that he brought up. It's called From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And one of the things that he talks about in that book, the three elements of happiness, right? Enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose, which really dovetail into a lot of the concepts that I think have been brought out in this webinar.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a wonderful book. I agree. Great. Yeah. So thank you all. And now we're going to move into our Q&A portion. And we have many questions. So the first question is for you, Eddie, which is why, what was the reason that you moved from LA to back to your hometown?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And it's interesting that when I was leaving Los Angeles, my friend said, "Why are you going over there?" And when I came here, people said, "Why did you come from there?" But I didn't have any biological family in California, although I lived there for nearly 4 decades. And so it was important for me to come back and be with my family that was left here. And that is the reason why I came, and I don't regret it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yes.
And as far as relationships go, I spend the winters in California. So I stay connected with those people that I grew up with during my adult life.
Yes.
And so.
Yeah, that's a wonderful combination of locations, right? Yeah, good for you for being able to do that. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so the next question is, and this is for anyone, can you talk about the pros and cons of staying in a familiar location versus moving to an unknown, maybe for health reasons or cost of living? Does anyone, I mean, Eddie, you might be able to answer this, but anyone else as well? People were very curious about the move idea.
So of course, if you stay where you are, that's familiar to you. And I would say economically, it was to my advantage to move away from Southern California here. So there are some advantages there, you know, in that regard. But it's comforting knowing or being where you're familiar with and people that you have relationships with. But then again, I was fortunate to develop new relationships as well. So
yeah, right, intentionally, yes. Yes. Louise, you wanted to say something else?
Yeah, I was out here for quite a few years before retiring, but our move to Vancouver, initially I was in Montreal for a number of years and then in Toronto. Our decision to come to Vancouver was in part spurred by where might we like to retire. So that was already in our, even though I think we were here for 12 years before we retired. Part of that had to do with climate. So like Eddie, I could not imagine spending another winter back east. You know, I really have become a Western weather wimp, I have to say. And also just being really close to nature was very important for us. Fortunately, in the process, one of our daughters moved out here because I think you said you moved back to family. I think if we were far, because we have 2 other children who are back east, I think that would be tough. I think it'd be tough to be away from all of our kids. And fortunately, we have one. So that would be one of the things I think people have to think about. At the end of the day, for me, family probably is more important than anything else. So as I said, we were very fortunate that one of our daughters moved out here and we now have a grandson. But so weather, nature, but family ultimately, I think, is the important factor.
Right, right. Thank you. Marty?
Yeah, I would just add to that question, or the answer to that question, if you really have focused on a particular area you want to move to and you haven't ever really lived there and don't know anybody, it's probably a good idea, maybe now that you are retired and you have time, rent a place for a month, see how you like it before you make that decision to uproot and end up down there.
Yeah, try it out first, for sure. Jan, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, all I would say is that I live in New York City, and as a retired person, it's a completely different place than it was as a working person. I've moved.
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so another person is asking, is a lack of hobbies, desire to travel, outside interests a reason not to retire? So, and what if you dislike your current job? This is sort of asked, you know, so let's just say, what are the reasons not to retire?
Financial.
Yes.
Could be financial issues, right?
Yes.
And if you're not ready, going back to make sure that that's your decision.
Your decision, yes.
But you could flip the question and say what are the reasons that you should not retire, right? Well, only because I've seen too many individuals who potentially say, I don't have a hobby, I don't have any outside interests. What in the world am I going to do? How am I going to find myself? And it's sad to hear that, because at some point, you're probably not going to be able to continue to do what you're doing. And hence, it's important to start looking at those cues when they're there, that I should start thinking about this.
Yeah.
And maybe it is time to start talking to people and figuring out, I think people are worried that it's going to be all or none very quickly. It doesn't have to be all or none. You prepare. It sometimes takes 5 years to prepare. And ideally, if you do it that way, it isn't going to be such a scary thing for you. So I would flip the question and say that really, you probably can't afford not to retire.
Right. And sometimes people don't have hobbies because they're so focused
Yes.
their work and they don't have time. They don't even have the headspace to think about what might be possible. And once you do have that freedom and flexibility, like all of you have mentioned, you can create that that type of exploration. Does anyone else have something to add? No.
I guess I've always thought people who feel that way, obviously there's the uncertainty that's locking them in, but there's also a comfort factor of what they know versus what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all worked in higher education, and I've seen some pretty sad situations where it goes on to a point where, for a health reason or some other crisis in the family, they have to leave, and they don't really have a quality of life component left, and they've missed the opportunity. So you need to involve that in the calculus of the decision.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first character, Phil, in my presentation.
Yes.
Yes. And basically died a year later because he couldn't make a life outside of work. He just didn't. And then he got sick, right? He just didn't do it, and then he retired anyway because his wife wanted him to, and then he got sick and he died, which was very sad. So are any of you involved in any way in your own university retiree associations? Louise, yes?
Well, I am with them. We're very fortunate at UBC to have a college, actually a college that is supported through the Provost's Office of Professors Emeriti. And so I have been had the pleasure of being on it's actually, I think, the Transition to Retirement Committee, and that's how I ultimately got involved in this. So we plan, we organize, we plan, we deliver seminars or sessions on transitioning to retirement. I think at least twice a year. So that, and I think and if I think about that, the individuals who are so defined by their work, particularly the academic faculty, there are organizations probably in each university that you can plug into and stay connected, right, to your university. And you can stay connected to the world you're comfortable in, to use your comfort thought, Marty. And be able to contribute and be able to listen in, et cetera, and expand and not feel that you're completely out of a realm where you were, where you spent so much of your time. So I think it's really important to seek out what are those organizations within each one of your university where you could start the connections as soon as possible.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Anyone else? Are you involved? The question was, are you involved in your societies of retired faculty?
Well, Dr. Gordon, you know that I am.
I know you. I have to say that Jan is presenting to us in a few weeks about, you want to talk about your presentation?
Yeah, so I'm going to present to the retired faculty about the B. Altman department store in New York City, which is now defunct, but is the current site of the CUNY Graduate Center, the City University of New York. And I did put a lot of work, for my other group, put a lot of work into learning all about that building, about department stores, and about the great man B. Altman. And I told Stacy about this, and she thought it would be good for retired faculty. So I think those kinds of things that are fun, that aren't about, I mean, we do need the support about how to retire, but sometimes just kind of switching up the subject and talking about something that's just fun is nice. Is great as a group.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Jan. Eddie or Marty, anything to add?
Well, because I'm not physically in LA, I'm not connected,
right.
but.
Right. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Did any of you go from, let's see, did any of you do a phased retirement? Louise, you said you went straight from work to retire, right? Eddie, did you phase your retirement?
No.
No, okay, Jan?
To some extent. So I maintained an appointment at one of the schools that where I have an appointment, and I continue to do a modicum of research there. I don't get paid for it though. So that's just because I want us to stay connected. Another thing that I'm doing that is maybe worth mentioning to this group is I have become a bit of a gadfly in my field. And I write now sort of opiniony pieces or perspective pieces. Everybody else is so busy doing the work. There's not a lot of, reflection going on. And so it's been really fun for me to do that. So that's another way you can stay involved professionally. And I found it's really well received. So that's a fun way to stay involved. But money-wise, I just cut the cord with NYU, right? That was
great. Marty, how about you?
Yeah, I transitioned. I agreed to stay on as special advisor to the president for a year during that transition period, but it was sort of on an as-needed basis. I had flexibility to start making my own plans and runway at the time. So,
right. Okay.
If I can, as I said, I decided, I know myself, and I think that's the question for whoever posed that question, is you need to know yourself. Are you comfortable being able to just say, okay, that's it? Whereas others aren't. And that's a fundamental question. And most universities do provide different approaches. You can do 30-30, whatever. You could do 50-50 or what. And research it. Find out what the options are. But ask yourself, are you somebody who truly can be part-time? Because a lot of people will say they're part-time, get paid part-time, and then work full-time, which is a mistake. Yeah. The real value of going part-time is you then start in those other 50% or whatever it is, exploring other things. That's your opportunity to not feel like you're completely out, but you have a chance to explore, and doing that very consciously. Because if you don't, you run the risk of, as I said, you're paid 50% and you're still working 100%.
Right. So one last question. We have amazing questions, and I feel terrible that we can't answer them all. You're all just full of wisdom. So I think this might be a good question to end on. To what extent was going out on the top a motivation to retire in your case? Who wants to answer first?
Very much so for me.
Yeah.
Aye.
Yes.
Well, what I've said this, and I've actually left 3 universities for different reasons, but when I retired, I said, I actually want people to miss me. I don't want them to wait until I'm gone, until I'm about to leave. So it was very selfish.
Not selfish, actually smart. Marty, you too?
Well, I think it was the pandemic really that set me on the course. That was a good finish point as we came out of that and approached what I hope was going to be normal, although I'm not sure we're actually fully back to normal in terms of the whole work structure and things like that. So it was a good time for me.
Great. Okay. So Eddie, Louise, Marty, Jan, thank you all so much for your advice, your wisdom, your stories of your experiences. This has been a really rich and wonderful conversation. So thank you. And I'm going to turn this back over to Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Stacy Gordon for serving as our moderator today, our panelists for sharing their expertise and insights into retirement, Fidelity Retirement Services for their valued support of this series, and all of you for attending today's session. I hope that this series has helped you to identify issues that may arise for each of you and to identify strategies for easing retirement transitions. We will stay in touch with you over the coming months to share additional resources that can be of assistance as you continue your retirement journey. We'll be sending you an evaluation along with a link to the recording of today's session. Please take a few minutes to complete the evaluation. Your feedback is very important to us and will help us to improve future webinars. So as we conclude this series, thank you all for your participation. And from all of us at Arohi, best wishes for fulfilling and enjoyable retirement.